My name is Janet, and the night of my daughter's wedding was supposed to be the proudest moment of my life. Instead, it was the night I learned just how far my family was willing to go to erase me. The ceremony was set in a grand cathedral, its chandeliers glowing, its polished wood gleaming as guests filled the pews. Everywhere I looked, faces I had known for years smiled and whispered. They all seemed to have their place, everyone except me. An usher, avoiding my eyes, guided me past row after row of guests. He did not stop near the front, not even in the middle. He kept walking, his hand lightly motioning until we reached the very last pew. There, behind a marble column, he gestured politely. "Here you go, Mrs. Hale." The word stung. Mrs. Hale. As if I were still tied to Nathan, my ex-husband, who now stood proudly at the altar. Beside him, Leona, his polished new wife, sat in the front row, draped in a glittering gown, smiling as if she belonged there more than I ever had. I lowered myself into the wooden pew, the hem of my modest dress brushing the cold floor. The organ played softly. I forced myself to sit tall, but every laugh from the front row felt like a stone hurled back at me. I had raised Amelia, paid for her schooling, stayed awake through nights of fever, sacrificed for her dreams. Yet now, on the most important day of her life, I was hidden, tucked away like an embarrassment. The procession began. Amelia walked down the aisle, radiant in silk and lace. For one fleeting moment our eyes met. I waited for recognition, for a smile, a nod, some sign that she saw me. But she looked away quickly, her gaze drifting toward Nathan and Leona. The ache in my chest deepened. It wasn't just neglect, it was deliberate. When the music faded, the priest began his welcome. His voice filled the cathedral, steady and warm. He spoke of love, family, sacrifice, the foundations upon which a marriage stands. I braced myself to hear Nathan's name, perhaps even Leona's, praised for their generosity. But instead, the priest's next words cracked the silence like thunder. "Before we proceed, we must honor the benefactor of this union. Without her steadfast dedication and her great generosity, today's celebration would not be possible. Let us thank Mrs. Janet Hale." Gasps rippled through the pews. Heads turned sharply toward me in the shadows. My face burned as dozens of eyes locked on mine. For a moment I thought I had misheard. But the priest continued, his gaze steady. "It is thanks to her contribution of $300,000 that this day shines so brightly." A wave of polite applause rose, scattered at first, then louder. Hands clapped, smiles spread. But the sound felt like mockery in my ears. Because I had not given $300,000. I had not given a cent. Leona's painted smile faltered. Nathan stiffened at the altar. Amelia's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. Not a word in my defense. I sat frozen in the last row, my heart pounding. My money, my hard-earned savings, had been stolen, laundered into this lavish display. And worse, my name had been stamped onto it, turning me into their silent, unwilling sponsor. Applause still echoed when I saw Nathan's glare from across the room. His lips moved silently, a warning only I could read. "Do not ruin this for us." The chandelier light above shimmered like ice. I folded my hands in my lap and forced myself to stay calm, outwardly silent, inwardly burning. Because in that moment, as the applause faded, I knew two things. They had stolen from me, and they had underestimated me. I smiled faintly as I stared at Nathan across the hall. If they thought I would sit quietly in the shadows forever, they had forgotten one truth. When you bury someone alive, you risk what happens when they claw their way out. The applause followed me home like an echo that would not die. $300,000. Benefactor. My name said out loud like a medal I had never earned. I set my purse on the table and stood very still. The clock ticked. The house breathed. I opened my laptop. Numbers do not flatter. Numbers do not lie. I signed into my bank and stared at the balance. It was smaller. Not by a little. By a canyon. I scrolled the transfers. Lines stacked like bricks. Event expense. Venue deposit. Contribution. Each one clean. Each one cruel. The largest was $300,000. The path ran through a name I did not know. Finch and Company. I felt the heat climb my neck. I printed every page. The printer choked, then obeyed. Sheets slid out and made a pale pile on the table. I laid them flat with both hands. Dates matched fittings. Tastings. The down payment on the hall. The music. The flowers that climbed the columns at the church like a bright green lie. There was a co-signer signature on the account. Old. From years before the divorce. I had left it there only because of Amelia's tuition once. I had trusted the past to stay asleep. I called Nathan. He answered on the second ring. His voice was smooth. Janet. You heard the priest. A proud night. You moved my money, I said. Calm. Precise. You took 300,000. You routed it through Finch and Company. You used my name. He paused. Then he laughed softly. Why are you being dramatic? This was for Amelia. You always said you would do anything for her. Well, you did. I did not agree, I said. I did not sign. Return the funds. Janet, he sighed. It is paid. The day is done. Do not embarrass her. You already had your moment. The church clapped for you. Enjoy it. He hung up. I stood in the quiet room and watched the cursor blink. Enjoy it. The phrase rang like a cheap bell. I picked up a pen and wrote the date on a yellow pad. Then I wrote 3 lines. Unauthorized transfers. Unknown intermediary. Public misrepresentation. I went to the small safe in the hall closet. I took out my old signature cards. Mortgage. Utilities. The deed to the little house my father left me. He had taught me to keep paper. When voices lie, he used to say, ink remembers. I needed more than bank lines. I needed the trick behind the trick. I opened the glove box of my car to check the service paperwork. An envelope lay there. Heavy. My name on the front in a hand that was not mine. Inside was an agreement. Benefactor pledge. My name typed above a signature that looked exactly like my hand. The loop of the J. The angle of the T. The small hook I make when I rush. A notary stamp sat in the corner. A finch was embossed beside the seal. I felt a cold pass through my arms. Someone had forged me. Someone had dragged my hand across paper without my body in the room. I needed a witness. I called Marjorie. She had been my friend since the year Amelia learned to read. She arrived in a sweater and flats and a look that could still a storm. She read the agreement. She read the transfers. She did not speak for a full minute. Then she said, "This is not a mistake. This is a plan." We set up my phone on a stand and filmed the pile as I named each page. Date. Amount. Destination. We filmed the agreement. We filmed the seal. We filmed my real signature beside the forgery. I backed up the files to a drive and slid it behind the flour canister. We made a second copy and put it under the bathroom sink. I was not going to lose this to a power surge or a sudden fire. At dawn I went to the bank. I asked for certified copies. The clerk lowered her voice. "If you suspect fraud, we can flag the account. We can freeze outgoing transfers for 72 hours while we start a review." "Freeze it," I said. I signed the form with a hand that felt like iron. Back home I called the number on the Finch seal. A recorded menu answered and routed me to a mailbox. I left a message. "This is Janet Hale. I did not authorize any pledge. Preserve all records. I will be in touch through counsel." I did not have counsel yet. I had intent. That would have to be enough for 1 hour. By noon I drove to the address printed under the Finch and Company logo. The office sat in a low brick building with shaded windows. The reception desk was empty. A small brass bird stood on the counter. I rang the bell. No one came. A janitor pushed a cart down the hall and looked away. I took photos of the door, the hour sign, the suite chart, the names of neighbor offices. I walked around the back. A loading door was propped on a rubber wedge. Inside, racks of bankers' boxes rose like gray walls. A man in a cap glanced up, then pulled the door closed fast. I stepped back and lifted my phone. The lens caught the last frame before the door met the jamb. The side of a box bore a printed label. WDF Vintage letters. A date. A code that meant nothing yet and everything at once. When I turned to leave, a message vibrated on my screen. Unknown number. "Enjoy your applause, Janet. Stay out of offices that are not yours." I swallowed. My heart beat too hard. Then it slowed. I breathed deep. I typed one reply. "Preserve everything. You will hear from my attorney." That evening I combed through Amelia's social posts. dress fittings, cake tastings. A caption under a photo of a sample bouquet read, "Dad says it is covered. Aunt Leona calls it art." My name did not appear in any caption. My face did not appear in any frame. I closed the app and stood at the window. The street lamp lit the sidewalk like a stage. The cat from next door crossed the pool of light and vanished. My phone buzzed again. A new message. "You have had enough recognition for one lifetime. Stop now, or the next announcement will not be about money." My hands turned cold. I screenshotted it. I saved it. I wrote one more line on my pad. Threat received. Time for counsel. I picked up the phone to call Marjorie. Before I could dial, it buzzed again. A new text. A photo of me in the last pew at the wedding. The angle was from the front. The caption read, "Know your place." The photo glowed on my phone screen, my face frozen in that humiliating back pew. The caption, "Know your place," was not a warning. It was a declaration. Whoever sent it wanted me small, silent, erased. But silence was the one thing I refused. I drove to Marjorie's house before dawn, clutching my binder of statements. She opened the door in her robe, worry already etched across her face. I showed her the message. She did not flinch. "This proves it," she said. "They're watching you. Which means they're afraid." Her words steadied me. Fear was a tool, proof I was cutting close to something they wanted hidden. That morning we met again with Evelyn Marks, the lawyer Marjorie had recommended. Evelyn was sharp, her voice precise. She laid out my papers across her oak desk. The forged agreement, the transfers, the screenshots. She examined each with practiced calm. "This is textbook fraud," she said. "Unauthorized transfers, forged signature, fake notary. You are the victim of a scheme. The law will be on your side. But we need structure. Paper alone is not enough. We build 3 pillars: financial records, eyewitness testimony, and motive." I nodded, heart pounding. Victor Ramirez, the forensic accountant Evelyn trusted, joined us in the afternoon. He wore thick glasses and carried binders thicker than my arm. He studied the transfer history with fascination. "This isn't sloppy," he said. "It's systematic. The pattern begins a year ago with smaller withdrawals. The wedding was just the final mask." He circled dates in red. "Look, every large transfer occurs on Thursdays. Finch and Company was a funnel. They wanted consistency, so the laundering looked like routine expenses." The word laundering sank deep. My family had not just stolen. They had constructed an entire machinery to wash my savings into their spectacle. Victor drafted graphs, timelines, and a flowchart connecting Finch and Company to the vendors. He showed how money moved from my account to Finch, then directly to the florist, the venue, even to a boutique where Leona's gown had been purchased. Marjorie's jaw tightened. They wore her money on their sleeves. But Evelyn reminded us of the human side. Graphs alone will not sway a judge. We need voices. People who saw receipts, who noticed whose name was written. That was when I thought of Harper, Amelia's closest friend and maid of honor. Harper had always been observant, her phone constantly snapping photos. I reached out nervously. To my surprise, she agreed to meet. At a quiet cafe, Harper arrived with her hair pulled back and her eyes cautious. She leaned close as I explained what had happened. Her face changed as she listened, disbelief softening into sympathy. "I wondered," she admitted. "At the boutique, the clerk handed Amelia a receipt with your name. I asked and she brushed it off. She said you were helping behind the scenes. I thought it was odd. She promised to testify if needed. You don't deserve this," she said firmly. "I'll back you." That night, with Evelyn's guidance, we recorded Harper's statement. Clear, simple, undeniable. She had seen my name on receipts tied to wedding expenses, even when I had never paid them. Piece by piece, the case took shape. But victories always carried shadows. As I filed Harper's statement into my binder, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the blocked number. This time it wasn't words. It was a short video clip, grainy, shot through glass. The footage showed me and Harper sitting in the cafe that afternoon, leaning across the table. The angle was too close for chance. They hadn't just been watching me. They were following my every move. The message under the video read, "Bring more friends if you like. We already know their faces. Next time we won't just watch." The video clip haunted me through the night. The way the camera lingered on Harper's face made my skin crawl. Whoever was behind Finch and Company wasn't just stealing. They were tracking, watching, threatening. By dawn I had made a decision. Fear would not make me retreat. It would make me gather more strength. I called Evelyn first. She listened without interruption, then said firmly, "This means they're scared. They want to intimidate you because they know you're building something solid. But if they're watching, we need to tighten your circle and expand your allies." She arranged a meeting that afternoon. In her office sat 4 chairs. One for me, one for Marjorie, one for Harper, and one for Victor, the forensic accountant. Evelyn presided like a general, laying out the map of our war. She tapped a finger on the table. "We have 3 pillars already. Money trail, forged agreement, eyewitness testimony. But Nathan will not roll over. He has lawyers. He has resources. And he has leverage over Amelia. We need more than facts, we need strategy." Victor adjusted his glasses. "The Thursday transfers tell us something important. This wasn't casual. It was routine. That means records exist in multiple places: payment processors, courier logs, vendor receipts. Even if Finch tries to delete files, shadows remain. I can pull them." Harper leaned forward nervously. "What about Amelia? She doesn't know the full truth. But if Dad has been using her name too?" Her voice trailed. I felt the ache in my chest at the mention of my daughter. She was caught in Nathan's orbit, blinded by his charm and Leona's glitter. Did she know she was complicit? Or was she just another mask? Evelyn didn't hesitate. "We bring Amelia in last." "Not yet. She's a risk until she chooses a side. For now, we strengthen Janet's foundation." That was when Evelyn introduced someone new. Quentin, a private investigator, walked in wearing a plain jacket and carrying a small notebook. He had eyes that scanned a room in seconds. "I've already looked at Finch and Company," he said. "Empty office during the day, but at night 2 men haul boxes out the back. They use a van with plates covered in plastic. They're moving evidence. We need to get ahead of them." He slid photos across the table. Blurry frames of boxes labeled with codes, much like the one I had glimpsed near the loading dock. "Those codes match the transfer dates," Victor murmured. "They're cataloging the theft." For the first time, I felt the shape of a team forming around me. Evelyn's sharp mind, Victor's numbers, Marjorie's loyalty, Harper's testimony, Quentin's eyes on the ground. They couldn't erase me now, not with so many witnesses standing at my side. That night, as we left the office, Evelyn put a hand on my arm. "Janet, listen to me. Silence was their weapon. Exposure will be ours. But you must stay patient. Revenge built in anger crumbles. Revenge built on truth stands forever." I went home repeating her words. Exposure. Truth. Forever. I pulled out my old notebook and wrote the beginnings of my counterplan. Step 1, freeze accounts. Step 2, force disclosure. Step 3, reveal. As I closed the book, my phone buzzed. Another message. My breath caught as I opened it. It was a photo of Amelia, taken that evening outside the courthouse, laughing with her bridesmaids. Across the bottom, typed in block letters, were 4 words. "Your daughter is ours." My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. They weren't only after me anymore. Nathan, and whoever was helping him, was pulling Amelia deeper into their scheme, whether she knew it or not. The message, "Your daughter is ours," glared at me until the screen dimmed. My chest tightened. For a moment, fear nearly drowned me. But then Evelyn's words returned like an anchor. Revenge built on truth stands forever. If Nathan thought Amelia was his shield, he was wrong. I would not let him use her as a pawn. I would not let him twist her silence into a weapon. The next morning, Evelyn summoned us back into her office. The air was heavy with urgency. Quentin had placed new photos on the table. Images of men loading boxes into a warehouse near the docks. "They're moving Finch's records out of sight," he explained. "By tomorrow, they may be gone entirely." Victor leaned forward. "Then the time for preparation is over. We move." Evelyn nodded. "We build the counterplan now. Everything we've gathered becomes the spine of our case. Janet, this is where we stop being reactionary and start being deliberate." She broke the plan into 3 stages. Stage 1, financial freeze. Evelyn would file a motion to freeze Finch and Company's accounts immediately, preventing Nathan from shifting money again. Victor's analysis would prove systematic theft, not random errors. Stage 2. Evidence consolidation. Harper's testimony, the forged agreement, the bank transfers and Quentin's surveillance would be collated into a single narrative. Judges don't want puzzles, Evelyn explained. They want pictures. We will paint them one. Stage 3. Exposure. Once the injunction was in place, Evelyn would schedule a formal hearing. With witnesses on record, she would reveal Nathan's fraud in open court. He humiliated you in public, Janet. We will return the favor, lawfully, with precision. I listened, writing each step in my notebook. For the first time since the wedding, I felt like the ground beneath me was solid. That evening, Victor stayed late at my dining table, his laptop glowing. Look at this, he said, turning the screen. Transfers didn't only cover the wedding. They funded Leona's jewelry, Nathan's business dinners, even hotel stays under initials that don't match either of them. It's all your money. My stomach twisted. It wasn't just theft. It was indulgence. They had worn my sacrifices like a costume, flaunting it while casting me as invisible. I printed the hotel invoices. Each had the same Thursday transfer date. Each matched the Finch codes Quentin had photographed. Marjorie clasped my hand. They can't hide now. You've built the wall. All Evelyn has to do is open the door. But the wall had cracks. Amelia. She called late that night, her voice trembling. Mom, Dad says you're trying to ruin him. He says you'll destroy everything. Please tell me it isn't true. I closed my eyes. Amelia, the money came from me. He used my name, my account. Look at your dress, the hall, the flowers, they were built on theft. Her breath caught. For a long moment she said nothing. Then softly, I don't know what to believe. The line went dead. By Friday morning, Evelyn's motion for account freezes was filed. We walked into the courthouse with binders thick as bricks. Nathan and Leona arrived in silk and smugness, their lawyer in tow. But for once I felt no tremor. Evelyn stood before the judge, her tone steady. Your Honor, this is not a family dispute. This is fraud. Here are the certified transfers, the forged signature, the invalid notary seal. Here are photographs of Finch employees removing records at night. And here, she placed Victor's chart flat on the bench, is the path of the stolen money, looping back to every wedding vendor, every indulgence. The judge leafed through the papers, his brows tightening. Nathan's lawyer blustered, waving the forged agreement, calling me bitter and ungrateful. But the forged notary stamp cut his words to ribbons. After a long pause, the judge struck his gavel. Motion granted. Finch and Company. Accounts frozen. All records to be produced within 7 days. Failure to comply will result in contempt. A murmur swept the courtroom. My pulse hammered. We had won the first strike. Nathan turned in his seat, his eyes like ice. His lips barely moved, but I read them clearly. This isn't over. That evening, as we regrouped in Evelyn's office, relief gave way to anticipation. We have momentum, Evelyn said. Now comes the reveal. The hearing will be public. Once the evidence is entered, Nathan can't hide. He'll choke on his own arrogance. I felt strength surge through me. For once, I wasn't the woman in the back pew. I was at the front of the fight. But just as I let myself breathe, Quentin's phone buzzed. He read the message, his face hardening. It's from my contact at the warehouse. There was a fire tonight. Finch's boxes gone. I gripped the edge of the table. The evidence we thought was safe had gone up in flames. And suddenly I realized, Nathan wasn't just fighting. He was desperate. And desperate men do dangerous things. The word fire echoed in my ears like a bell tolling at midnight. Quentin's voice was steady as he explained, but my stomach twisted. Finch and Company's warehouse had burned, the very boxes he had photographed gone to ash. The timing was too precise to be chance. Evelyn steepled her fingers. This is arson, plain and simple. They knew the freeze order tied their hands financially, so they're erasing the trail. But we still have certified records. We still have Victor's charts. They can't burn bank data. Her calm steadied me, but the truth pressed down hard. The other side was willing to torch evidence. What else would they torch if cornered? The following morning, Evelyn called an emergency meeting. Marjorie, Harper, Victor, Quentin, we all crowded into her office. The air was thick with urgency. Victor opened with good news. The bank already delivered certified copies of every flag transfer. They're safe in the court system now. Even if Finch burns every box in the city, they can't rewrite those numbers. Relief flickered, but Harper spoke next, her voice shaking. Janet, Amelia called me last night. She asked if I thought you were exaggerating. She said Nathan told her you were jealous of Leona and trying to ruin her wedding memory. He's turning her against you. The ache in my chest sharpened. She's my daughter, I whispered. He's poisoned her view of me since she was old enough to listen. But I won't let her be destroyed with him. Evelyn cut in firmly. This is why tomorrow matters. The court will hear arguments again at the injunction hearing. If we can prove the arson ties to Finch, it won't just be fraud. It will be obstruction. Nathan's empire will collapse. We prepared late into the night. Quentin compiled photos of the men hauling boxes. Victor mapped the timeline. Transfers on Thursday, boxes moved on Friday, fire on Saturday. The pattern was undeniable. Marjorie sat beside me, her hand warm over mine. They think you're still the woman in the back row, Janet. But tomorrow you'll be the one in front. The morning of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse with my head high. Nathan was already there, dressed in a navy suit that screamed money and power. Leona clung to his arm, her lips curved in a polished smile. Amelia stood behind them, her eyes rimmed red. She looked at me once quickly, then away. Reporters swarmed the steps. Cameras clicked. Questions rang out. Mrs. Hale, did you really fund the wedding? Mr. Hale, are you facing charges of fraud? Evelyn guided me past them, her stride brisk. Ignore the noise, she whispered. The courtroom is where we win. Inside, the judge opened the session. Nathan's lawyer argued first, dismissing the fire as coincidence, calling Finch and Company a small firm with poor safety protocols. But Evelyn rose, her voice cutting clean through his words. Your Honor, we present photographic evidence of Finch employees removing boxes hours before the fire. We present sworn statements from our investigator that the van returned empty after the blaze. And we present the timing. The very weekend this court froze Finch's accounts. That is not coincidence. That is obstruction. She laid Quentin's photos and Victor's charts before the judge. The courtroom murmured. Nathan's mask cracked. He leaned forward, his jaw tight, eyes narrowing at Evelyn. Leona tugged his sleeve, whispering frantically. Amelia sat frozen, her face pale as snow. The judge tapped his gavel once. The evidence suggests deliberate destruction of records. This court finds grounds to escalate the matter. A referral for criminal investigation will be made. Gasps rippled through the room. Nathan's lawyer sputtered, but the judge silenced him. Nathan turned in his seat, his glare slicing into me. His lips moved, the words silent but clear. You'll regret this. We filed out of the courthouse into a wall of reporters. Microphones stretched like spears. Evelyn pulled me close, whispering, Stay composed. They smell weakness. I nodded, forcing my voice steady. The truth is stronger than fire. The cameras flashed. Nathan shoved past the crowd, Leona snapping at the reporters, Amelia trailing behind like a ghost. I thought the worst was behind me, until Quentin's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face draining of color. He showed Evelyn, then me. A text from an unknown number. Next time it won't be boxes that burn. My breath caught. They had escalated from fraud to arson, and now the threat was no longer about paper. It was about lives. And I knew mine and Amelia's were at the top of their list. The threat, next time it won't be boxes that burn, stayed on my skin like smoke. Evelyn's office grew silent after Quentin read it aloud. Every face around the table reflected the same truth. This was no longer just a financial fight. It had become war. Evelyn leaned forward, her tone sharper than ever. This message is desperation. They know we have enough to crush them in court. That means they'll push harder. But that also means it's time. Janet, are you ready? I swallowed, then nodded. I've been ready since they placed me in the back row. The day of the public hearing arrived. It wasn't just another injunction. This session would decide whether Nathan's fraud and the obstruction tied to Finch would be entered into full legal proceedings. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, extended family, even acquaintances who'd once whispered about me sat waiting. Nathan entered first, Leona glittering on his arm as though nothing could touch them. Amelia followed, her expression unreadable, a tremor in her step. I entered last, Marjorie at my side, Evelyn and Victor behind me. For the first time I felt I was not alone in that room. The judge called for order. Evelyn rose. Her voice carried like steel wrapped in velvet. Your Honor, today is not about bitterness. It is not about family feuds. It is about theft, forgery, and fraud carried out through Finch and Company and laundered into a wedding. My client, Mrs. Janet Hale, was humiliated, her funds stolen, and her name forged to cover a spectacle she never agreed to sponsor. We present not emotion but proof. She handed the clerk a binder thick with records. Victor's graphs projected on a screen, showing every Thursday transfer, every funnel into Finch, every vendor payment. Photos of the men hauling boxes, the fire report, Harper's statement. Each piece slid into place like stones in a wall. The room buzzed with whispers. Nathan's lawyer rose next, his tone sharp. He called me bitter, accused me of jealousy toward Leona, suggested I fabricated evidence. But the words fell flat when the judge lifted the notary affidavit declaring the seal a fake. Explain this, the judge demanded. Nathan shifted in his seat, his jaw working. His lawyer stammered about clerical errors, about misunderstandings. But Evelyn cut through cleanly. Your Honor, there is no misunderstanding in a forged signature. Then for the first time Amelia rose. Her voice shook, but it carried across the silence. I saw receipts with my mother's name. I asked about them. Dad told me she agreed. But she never did. He lied. To all of us. Gasps rippled. Leona's face drained of color. Nathan turned on Amelia, his eyes blazing. You ungrateful child, he hissed. The judge slammed his gavel. Order. But the damage was done. Amelia's testimony cracked Nathan's mask wide open. His arrogance, his control, his carefully polished image. It all shattered in front of the room. Evelyn seized the moment. Your Honor, the victim has been mocked, erased, and threatened. Yet she stands here with evidence, with witnesses, with courage. We ask this court to move this case to trial for fraud, forgery, and obstruction. The judge's voice was final. Motion granted. This court orders a full trial. Accounts remain frozen. All additional evidence to be surrendered within 7 days. Mr. Hale, you are hereby under investigation. The gavel fell with a crack that seemed to echo through every year Nathan had stolen from me. As the courtroom emptied, the crowd pressed in. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed. Nathan stormed past, Leona clutching his arm. Fury etched into his face. Amelia lingered, her eyes meeting mine for the first time with something I hadn't seen in years. Shame but also hope. I thought perhaps the worst was over, until Quentin grabbed my elbow. His face was pale. Janet, come outside. You need to see this. On the courthouse steps, a black SUV idled. Its tinted window rolled down just long enough for a gloved hand to toss something onto the pavement. A small metal bird. A brass finch, identical to the one I'd seen at Finch and Company's office, landed at my feet. Attached was a note. This isn't the end. It's the beginning. I bent down, the weight of the brass finch heavy in my palm. Nathan had been exposed, but someone bigger, someone behind Finch, was still pulling the strings. And they had just declared war. The brass finch was cold in my hand, heavier than it looked. Reporters swarmed around me, snapping photos, shouting questions, but all I could hear was the silence in my chest. This wasn't just Nathan's game anymore. Finch was more than a shell company, it was a shield for someone else. Someone still hidden. Evelyn steered me away from the cameras. Don't react now, she whispered. Let them photograph you calm. Power comes from control. I forced my hand to unclench. I slipped the finch into my purse and lifted my chin. The truth speaks for itself, I told the reporters, and walked down the courthouse steps as though the bird in my bag didn't feel like a threat waiting to strike. That evening, we gathered at Marjorie's house. The table was cluttered with binders and coffee mugs. But for the first time since the wedding, there was also laughter. Small, cautious, but real. Harper recounted the look on Nathan's face when Amelia spoke. Victor cracked a rare smile, saying, "Numbers don't lie, but sometimes people finally do." Yet under the laughter lay tension. Quentin broke it with his quiet voice. "The SUV wasn't Nathan's. I ran the plate. It belongs to a logistics company tied to Finch. Whoever left that bird wasn't working for him. They were watching him too." The room went still. "So this goes deeper," Evelyn said softly. "Nathan thought he was untouchable, but Finch used him as much as he used Janet. They won't let him take the fall alone." Marjorie folded her arms. "Then who are they protecting?" No one answered. The fallout began the very next morning. News broke fast. Local businessmen investigated for fraud. Nathan's name was on every headline. His polished photo beside the words forgery and obstruction. Clients pulled back. Leona canceled a charity luncheon. Amelia shut down her social media. And then the phone calls started. The first was from Nathan himself. His voice was no longer smooth. It was hoarse-edged with desperation. "Janet, listen to me. You don't know what you've started. These people aren't just family. Finch doesn't forgive." I said nothing. I let him speak. "They'll come after me. After Amelia. After you. We have to fix this together before it's too late." I hung up. The second call came from an unknown number. A man's voice, low and clipped. "Mrs. Hale. You've proven stubborn. Stop pressing. Walk away from Finch. Take your daughter and leave. Otherwise this will end badly for all of you." The line went dead. I sat frozen. My phone buzzed again, this time a text. A photo of Amelia leaving her apartment, her head down, carrying grocery bags. The caption, "She's not safe if you keep going." By evening, Evelyn had looped in law enforcement. Detectives interviewed Quentin about the SUV, took the brass Finch into evidence, and promised to increase patrols near my home. But their faces told me what their words did not. They weren't sure if they could stop what was coming. Meanwhile, Nathan's empire unraveled in real time. His business partners released statements distancing themselves. Leona was photographed shouting at him outside their house. Amelia was caught between headlines, portrayed as the daughter of scandal. I sat in my kitchen watching the news coverage, my binder of evidence beside me. I had wanted exposure, and I had it. But exposure was a double-edged sword. It had burned Nathan, yes, but now the flames licked toward me and Amelia too. Late that night, the doorbell rang. I froze. Marjorie, who was staying with me for safety, grabbed my arm. Quentin, seated by the window, signaled us to stay quiet. He moved to the door and peered through the peephole. On the porch sat a single envelope. No footsteps, no vehicle in sight. Quentin retrieved it carefully and slid it open with a pen. Inside was a photo, grainy black and white. It showed me sitting at my piano last week unaware. Across the bottom, scrawled in thick black marker, were the words, "We are closer than you think." I clutched the photo, my heart pounding. Nathan was cornered, but the real enemy had just stepped out of the shadows, and they were already inside my world. Morning light seeped through my curtains, pale and thin, but it did nothing to chase away the weight of the photo in my hands. My image at the piano stared back at me, grainy and blurred, proof that someone had been inside my yard, maybe even my house. Finch's shadow was closer than ever. Marjorie brewed coffee, her movements brisk, almost angry. "They want to break you, Janet. Don't let them. If you flinch now, they win." I nodded, though my fingers still trembled around the cup. Fear was sharp, but so was resolve. They had already stolen my money, my dignity at the wedding, my place in Amelia's life. They would not steal my courage. The consequences of the courtroom reveal rippled outward by the hour. Nathan's phone calls grew frantic, but I let them go unanswered. His empire was collapsing like wet paper. The morning news showed his office windows boarded, employees carrying boxes, investors walking away. Leona's name trended with words like fraud and scandal. But Amelia, she was caught in the crossfire. I worried most for her. She had spoken the truth in court, and now she bore the weight of being his daughter and my child all at once. Harper called me mid-morning. "Amelia hasn't left her apartment since yesterday. She's shaken. Nathan keeps pounding on her door, yelling. I think she's scared of him now." My heart twisted. I wanted to run to her, to protect her as I always had, But Evelyn's warning echoed in my mind: don't act without strategy. If Finch's watchers had followed me to my piano, they would surely be following me to Amelia too. Evelyn convened us in her office once more. Victor presented updates. The bank has now tied Finch and Company to at least 4 shell companies. Each moved Janet's money through identical Thursday transfers. This is larger than one wedding scam. It's organized fraud. Quentin added grim news. I traced the SUV from the courthouse. It belongs to a fleet used by a logistics network. That network connects to one of Finch's shell firms. They're professional. They won't stop with letters or birds. Evelyn folded her hands. Which is why tomorrow we move to file civil claims directly. Fraud. Restitution. Damages. Janet, we don't just freeze Nathan's accounts. We seek to empty them lawfully to recover what he stole. That is the counterblow they cannot survive. Marjorie grinned fiercely. Humiliation in court wasn't enough. Let him choke when he sees the bill. I breathed deep. For the first time, revenge didn't feel like rage. It felt like justice sharpening its edge. But as night fell, the consequences grew more personal. Amelia finally called me. Her voice was raw, torn between guilt and fear. Mom, I didn't know it was your money. I thought Dad. I thought he wanted to give me something special. When I found out, I froze. I didn't know how to face you. But when I saw those transfers in court, I knew. He lied to me too. Tears pricked my eyes. You are not him, Amelia. You spoke the truth when it mattered. That makes you stronger than both Nathan and Leona combined. Her voice dropped. But it's not just Dad. He said if Finch goes down, I'll go with him. That my name's on accounts too. Mom, what if they drag me into this? My grip on the phone tightened. The very thought chilled me. Nathan had not only stolen from me. He had planted his daughter inside the fraud like a decoy. Listen to me, I said. Whatever he did in your name will prove you didn't know. You are not his shield. You are my daughter. She wept, and for the first time in years, it felt like we were mother and child again, not pawns in Nathan's empire. But Finch's shadow had not gone quiet. Just before midnight, Quentin rang my doorbell, his face grim. He laid down a folder. Inside were surveillance stills from his contact. One photo showed Nathan in a dim restaurant booth, shaking hands with a man whose face was mostly hidden. On the table between them sat a brass Finch identical to the one thrown at my feet. Quentin tapped the photo. This is proof Nathan isn't just a thief. He's still working with them. Even after exposure, even after court, he's cutting deals. And if Finch thinks he's weak, they may decide to erase him altogether. I stared at Nathan's blurred figure, his hand hovering over the brass bird. If Finch could turn on him, then none of us were safe. Tomorrow's court battle might not just strip him of wealth, it might decide which of us walked away alive. The courtroom felt different that final day. The reporters were still there, the whispers still thick in the air, but the atmosphere was no longer amusement at a family feud. It was tension, the kind that coils before a storm. Everyone knew Nathan's empire was collapsing. Everyone wondered if Finch and Company would drag us all down with it. Evelyn was unshaken. She guided me to our seats, her briefcase clicking open with the same precision as always. Today we finish it, she murmured. Not with shouting. With paper, signatures, and truth. Nathan entered minutes later, looking thinner, drawn. His suit hung loose on his frame. Leona trailed behind, her jewelry gone, her face tight with rage. Amelia came last, walking separately, her hands clasped like she carried her own judgment. The judge reviewed the filings. Fraud, forgery, restitution, damages. Victor presented the final charts. Every stolen dollar mapped. Quentin's photo showed Nathan meeting with Finch operatives, brass Finch between them. Harper's testimony confirmed receipts with my name. And then in a steady voice Amelia rose. My father told me lies. He made me believe my mother had agreed to pay. She didn't. He used my name too, and I was too afraid to ask questions. But I won't be silent anymore. He betrayed both of us. The silence after her words was heavier than any gavel. Nathan's shoulders slumped. He tried to rise to argue, but Leona pulled away, her face turned from him. Alone he looked small for the first time in his life. The judge's ruling came swift. This court finds sufficient evidence of fraud and forgery. Restitution is awarded to Mrs. Hale. Accounts belonging to Mr. Nathan Hale and Finch and Company are seized. Damages totaling $400,000 are ordered, and this matter is referred for criminal prosecution. The gavel struck final and sharp. It was over. At least, the part that had begun in that cathedral when they seated me in the shadows. I walked out of the courthouse not as the woman they had erased, but as the woman who had brought them to their knees. Outside, reporters searched. Cameras flashed. I raised my voice so every microphone caught it. They put me in the back row. They stole my money. They tried to silence me. But the truth is louder than lies. And I will never be erased again. Amelia appeared at my side. She didn't speak, but she took my hand. That was enough. That evening, back at my modest home, I opened my piano. The same seat where someone once snapped a photo in the shadows now became my place of peace. Marjorie poured wine. Victor closed his laptop. Evelyn smiled faintly for the first time in weeks. The brass Finch still sat on my shelf, sealed in an evidence bag. A reminder that Finch's shadow might still linger, but I had faced them and I had won. Revenge hadn't been fire. It hadn't been rage. It had been patience, strategy, and truth. As I closed my notebook for the last time, I wrote one line. They thought humiliation would bury me. Instead, it made me rise higher than ever before. To anyone listening, remember this. If someone steals your dignity, your money, your place in the world, do not let them convince you that silence is safety. Gather proof. Find allies. Build your case brick by brick. Revenge does not need to be reckless. Revenge can be justice, and justice can be powerful. Do not sit quietly in the back row. Stand, speak, and let the truth echo louder than the lies.